This is the OFN Today on the Our Football Network as we talk San Francisco 49ers football. And we're going to do that once again with Cam Inman. He is the NFL and San Francisco 49ers reporter for the San Mercury News. And that is San Jose Mercury News. That's at mercurynews.com. You can check it out right there down on the bottom of the screen next to Cam's name. And Cam, good to talk to you again. I know it wasn't the season that San Francisco fans wanted after a Super Bowl appearance, but it happens, doesn't it? And I think we might have even talked about it. There's this Super Bowl jinx that seems to happen to the teams that don't win the Super Bowl if your name is not associated with the New England Patriots. And it happened to the Niners, and the injuries were just incredible.
It was a Super Bowl hangover like no other. When you throw in the COVID-19 pandemic in the mix, when your star quarterback and your star defensive player, Nick Bosa, when they both go down in week 2, the season all of a sudden was out the window. And the fact that they kind of stayed competitive throughout and weren't officially eliminated until the final couple weeks. I mean, it wasn't a great season at all. It was not a good season. It was a miserable season. They got kicked out of Santa Clara, out of their headquarters for the final month of the season because of COVID-19 restrictions, and had to spend it in Arizona. So they couldn't wait to get to 2021 fast enough.
Yeah. And the season ends, and the biggest story, of course, is losing your defensive coordinator. And tell me about the impact that Robert Saleh had on the San Francisco defense, and how you think the team is going to respond without him.
Everybody spoke very highly of Robert Saleh's job, how well he did with that defense over 4 years. It wasn't always so rosy, though. I'll go back 2 years ago. Midway through his term here, and everybody was wondering if he was the right defensive coordinator because the defense wasn't playing that great. And then they brought in Nick Bosa, Dee Ford. They had a pass rush, a great defensive front. They made the Super Bowl. Saleh was getting charged up on the sideline, so everybody is aware of him. And then he really did a really good coaching job this last year. When you lose Bosa and Ford by week 2, you're shuffling guys in and out constantly, and you still had a top 10 ranked defense. Spoke very highly of him. He's a very energetic, optimistic coach, and it didn't surprise anybody that he was getting a head coaching job. The fact that he landed with the New York Jets, he's got some work to do there, but I think everybody's excited to see him go. And now Kyle Shanahan promoted from in-house. He promoted D'Amico Ryans, the linebacker coach, who did a great job getting Fred Warner up to an all-pro level. And worked with Saleh for many years. So I don't think the defense will change too much other than their style. D'Amico is not the outgoing voice, all gas, no break kind of guy like Saleh preached. But he's a guy that knows this defense and knows the personnel quite well and knows what's supposed to happen. So they're changing over more of their coaching staff than they ever have in Kyle Shanahan's 4 seasons. Saleh took a few assistants with him. So there might be some difference on that side, but the assistant they maintained is Chris Kocurek, the defensive line coach, who really brought a lot of energy to that Super Bowl run 2 years ago.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the offense. Let's kick things off because we have to start with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Got to start with
his
Jimmy
contract, and based on the injuries, and based on all the rumors about whether or not he's going to be here, and the Niners are looking to, maybe Kirk Cousins, or could they get into the Deshaun Watson deal? What do you think is going to happen here?
I've maintained all along that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be their starting quarterback in 2021, and it's not necessarily because Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch continue to reiterate that, saying that he's going to be their guy because they have to say that. It's just kind of you survey the landscape. Obviously, this offseason, a lot of quarterback movement. You saw it start with Stafford and Goff trading places. I just have a hard time seeing them go all in and do something where you would overpay for a quarterback to get rid of one that you still like. The only thing you don't really like about him is his injury history, which is not necessarily his fault. The ACL that ruined his 2018 season, he bounced back from it and made the Super Bowl. This past season, he had a couple of high ankle issues that were pretty serious and kept him out. And, by the time he was healthy up, the last month of the season was gone. So I think that the locker room really likes Jimmy Garoppolo a lot. If he had some kind of locker room issues where people didn't believe in him,
Hmm.
I could see them unloading him a lot faster. Um, Everybody seems to really gravitate towards Jimmy. That's why the Niners invested so much in him at the start of 2018 after he went 5-0 to finish off 2017 when he became their quarterback. They just saw how the team gravitated, and he lifted everybody up and believed in him. That is immeasurable. And so when you're looking at bringing him in or sending him out and bringing in maybe a Kirk Cousins or a Matt Ryan, I don't think that's even possible financially. I think that's something that those cap hits that Minnesota or Atlanta would have to do to reunite Kyle Shanahan with one of his former quarterbacks is too cost prohibitive for those teams. I mean, it's the NFL; anything can happen.
Sure.
But I don't think they're desperate to get rid of Jimmy. So that's why I think they're going to roll one more year with him. But they do need to bring in some better backup competition, not necessarily to push him, but just to have him to have somebody available besides C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins, who were serviceable, I guess you can say. There were too many turnovers with Mullins. He's got elbow issues and may not be able to play in 2021. So if they bring in a veteran that's shown who can win in the NFL, then that would serve them well. What I think is going to happen, honestly, is they go with Jimmy. They draft a quarterback in the first couple rounds.
Okay.
Hopefully, groom him on.
And that's take a look at the draft capital. The team has 10
Yeah,
picks.
yeah.
They get the 2 additional picks because of Salah.
And Salah and Martin Mayhew, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mayhew's pick comes in and down the road, but yeah.
okay. And then also Quan Alexander, which I thought was a good deal. I didn't think Quan Alexander was really doing anything for you guys.
Correct.
You got a 5th
Correct.
round draft pick for it.
It's not you
So
guys. I don't get paid by the Niners. I will say he didn't do much for the 49ers. He had been unseated by Dre Greenlaw on the depth chart. They needed to make some money moves around, and he wasn't playing well. So yeah, that was a smart move. Yeah, they picked up a 5th rounder.
yeah, and the 12th overall pick. So I could see, especially with that
Mm-hmm.
additional 3rd round pick, why it does make a lot of sense that the team would figure, okay, this is a spot. Maybe we can grab a
Right.
quarterback. But when you take a look at the quarterbacks that are going to be available around that time, everyone is just going to zero in on Jones because it just seems like once you get through those first few guys, those top 4 guys, then you've got the Alabama quarterback, and then after that, it's kind of shaky. I don't really know if there's any other quarterbacks. I know there's another lower level kid out there besides Trey Lance, but I don't know. Have you
Well, that's
noticed
why.
anybody yourself?
Well, that's why you got months to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
It'll be draft season. But here's the thing. All right. So 49er fans have a conniption over. They want to see Zach Wilson from BYU because Steve Young went to BYU, obviously,
Uh-huh.
right? They think
Okay.
it'd be so much fun. And Zach Wilson has said that he can see himself playing for Shanahan in that offense. Wonderful, but he's not going to be available
No.
after the first 4 or 5 picks. And the Niners, they're not. That's a lot of money to pull up to go up and get. I mean, maybe they do and send Garoppolo on a deal that way. I just don't see that. They'd have to do a lot more than that. But again, one thing to keep in mind is in 4 seasons, the only quarterback Kyle Shanahan drafted is a guy not many people had on the radar, and that was C.J. Beathard, and he drafted him in the 3rd round. So Shanahan will see something he likes that maybe
Okay.
others don't like, right? I mean, he didn't like Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes enough in 2017 to draft them. So you got
That's
to be
true.
circumspect on that, right?
Yep.
He passed over them for Solomon Thomas at number 3 overall, and that backfired in a big way. So I think they got to do a lot of studying, not only about the quarterbacks that are veterans right now and free agency coming up, but also in the draft.
Yeah, the only guy actually besides the top 4, and then Mac Jones being more than
Kyle
likely the
Trask,
5th
Mac
guy
Jones,
would be
yeah.
Kyle Trask. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they'll do their homework and due diligence. And Adam Peters, John Lynch's vice president of player personnel, will be all out there. He's scouted all these guys up, and they'll figure something out of that. Hope.
And look, you never know too, because we've seen quarterbacks, they wind up getting into interviews or whatever, and their
Mm-hmm.
stock drops even. So we
Right.
don't know if Zach Wilson's stock will drop. We have no idea. I
Correct.
doubt it, but it's possible. So
Yep.
you keep your options open.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But it is good to know that because you do look at the roster and it looks like that it's for the outsider could say, okay, well, you're going to probably bring Mullins back, but he's restricted, as you mentioned, though. He's got the elbow injury.
Yeah.
So that's a
Exactly.
concern. And then also let's keep in mind that, and we can kind of fast forward with this, but get back to it after we're done with the offense, is Robert Saleh. With all of these free agents available on defense, I mean, it's just a given that he's going to wind up signing 3 or 4 guys.
Absolutely. They have 27 unrestricted free agents. He's going to poach a few of them. He already poached about 5 assistant coaches.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, the Niners understand that. They're braced for that. Um, Basically, their whole secondary is free agents outside of safety Jimmy Ward. Okay, so he's probably going to take
Yeah.
Richard Sherman or a couple cornerbacks. The one they probably want to get back the most is K'Wan Williams, a slot corner. Um, they will lose some guys. I mean, this is a team that was in the Super Bowl a year ago, so that comes with some extra weight come free agency, and some guys will be able to parlay that into other deals. And the Niners, um, if you want to talk free agency, I think their number one priority is re-signing Trent Williams at left tackle and Kyle Juszczyk at fullback. I think those are huge gets that they got to keep in place, keep the Shanahan offense churning.
And then you mentioned Williams as far as the corners. So that means what? That you think they're not going to, what they believe will be overspend for Witherspoon?
But not Witherspoon. Jason Verrett's probably the number one cornerback that they'd want to re-sign. He bounced back from all those leg injuries and played really well this past season.
That was nice to
Kind of
see. Yeah, that was
Yeah, it
nice.
was, and he was kind of like a comeback player of the year. It's not like he had 2 interceptions, but they were timely ones. His style of play is something that they love and covet, where
Okay.
he's feisty. Sherman obviously is just the alpha dog in the room and helps bring along guys. And he's played 10 years in the league now. I think they like each other, but his time maybe where he follows Robert Saleh. And K'Wan Williams is somebody they've loved. K'Wan Williams, even though he hasn't made like the type of plays that really get him national notice, but he can be used as a blitz off the slot. He plays well in coverage, so he's going to make out pretty well in free agency. Witherspoon's a guy that was drafted in the 3rd round. He played 4 years. He went in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse a couple times. I don't think he's coming back. I think he needs a fresh start, and that they'll move on without him. But when you lose all your cornerbacks, maybe you do try to keep the one that's been in your system the longest.
Okay. So even though statistically it appeared that Witherspoon had his best year, you're not so
Well,
sure, or
no, he was on the bench most of the year. They did not. He was behind the pecking order behind Emmanuel Mosley as well.
okay.
But he was able to come in the last few games of the season and kind of rectify his reputation. So that could help him in free agency. There was so many internal issues between he and a couple of the coaches that it took him a while to fight his way back. He did so in practice and in his work ethic in the weight room. And so, but I think when you get to that point and you can get away, I think he's gone.
This is why I like having these conversations with you, Cam, because these are the things I would never know. Just looking on the outside and looking at stats, and
Yeah.
it's great to find this stuff out. Okay, let's stick on defense then while we're there, because of the defensive line. Armstead's numbers dropped, but that's not a surprise
Right.
considering all of the injuries that were surrounding him.
Right.
Hyder seemed to play well. He's a free agent. And then, of course, Solomon Thomas. Let's start with Thomas. What's the deal with his career now?
It's fascinating because after he tore his ACL in week 2, everybody stopped talking about him. Right? People kept talking about Nick Bosa because he was sorely missed because he tore his ACL like 3 snaps earlier. But Thomas, he was poised for a better season because they were going to use him just on the interior, which is where he probably should have been playing his whole career, and they just kept flip flopping him as an edge rusher, which didn't work, as an inside guy that didn't work on rundowns because he get pushed around too much. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. He obviously has had a lot of personal issues. So if he needs to get a fresh start somewhere else, I think everybody would understand it. If he feels at home and comfortable that the 49ers have supported him through a lot of it, then he returns for some needed depth because it's a defensive front that's undergone some changes from their Super Bowl years. Dee Ford's the biggest mystery on that defensive front, whether he would come back or not, or even if he can come back, if his career is in jeopardy because of a back issue. They're expecting Bosa back at full strength from his ACL, and that would benefit Eric Armstead, who you invested in a lot last year, rather than pay up to Forrest Buckner. Then he brought in Javon Kinlaw, their 1st-round draft pick, who played pretty well. Wasn't huge on stats, but he made an impact where they feel good about that pick in the 1st round. So that's why Solomon Thomas gets lost in that whole shuffle. And If it comes to that number 12 pick and the 49ers draft a defensive lineman for, I think it would be the sixth time in seventh draft with their top pick, it wouldn't
Uh-huh.
shock anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their style, is we want to get to the quarterback as fast as we can. And that helps everybody in the secondary that may be on a contract year.
And what about Blair? Because he had the
Mm.
entire season wiped out after the ACL
Yeah.
in Week
Yeah.
10 in 2019.
Right, and he had a setback in his rehabilitation, required another surgery. He's a guy where I think he's following Robert Saleh to New York. I don't. I think the Niners like him, but Saleh loves him, and if he wants to kind of get a fresh start somewhere else, and I don't think the Niners are going to overpay. They would give him a minimum deal, which probably is what the Jets might. The Jets may have more money and give him a little bit more. Maybe that attracts him. Um, he was kind of an under the radar guy, but when he played as a reserve, he was smart and he made some plays, but not enough to overspend, especially a guy that's had serious leg issues the last 2 years.
What about, we talked to corners. What about safety? Jimmy Ward's numbers were down a little bit, but he was still a steady player.
Yeah.
And Tart, he was injured. It just seems like, I mean, his career hasn't really lived out to the way the Niners had hoped, huh?
Yeah. Okay. Let's start with Jimmy Ward because he's the longest tenured 49er. I think he's been around 6, 7 years. He actually played pretty well last season. He's not your safety that's going to be making plays on the ball, making interceptions. He's going to keep the play in front of him. Very hard hitter. He made some really good coverage plays against the Rams slot guys to get those wins when they needed them. So Jimmy's actually kind of underrated, underappreciated
Okay.
because he was a first round pick. But he's kind of the steady force now in the secondary. Tart was a great communicator, strong safety. Again, he's been hit by injuries so much the last few years, and he's a free agent. And so he was replaced by Tarvarius Moore, a third-round pick from a couple years ago. And Tarvarius Moore is a very quick, fast guy, still young and raw as a safety, but he did have an interception in the Super Bowl. That's when they went and celebrated in the end zone, took a picture, and then the whole Super Bowl went south from there
Yeah.
for the 49ers.
Uh-huh.
But I think that's your safety tandem going forward is Jimmy Ward and Tarvarius Moore.
Okay.
And I think they had a couple other guys back there. Marcel Harris, who is I believe a restricted free agent that they can bring back if they want. He's a hard hitter, but he's not great in coverage. And then you're probably looking at maybe an undrafted rookie come in or somebody that was on the practice squad last year.
And by the way, before we move over to offense, Warner, his contract is
Oh,
going to be up after this next season. Are the Niners going to be able to resign him now, as soon as they can, or how's that going to work out?
A year ago, I thought they were going to re-sign DeForest Buckner to a big deal because he was the consummate pro. He was great. He was all pro caliber, Pro Bowl caliber, and they traded him away to Indianapolis rather than pay him as the second highest paid defensive tackle to Aaron Donald, which I think was a move that was terrible and backfired on them and hurt their locker room morale as well. Fred Warner, they have to pay. He is basically the equivalent of where they were a year ago with George Kittle too. Kittle had become this great tight end. Everybody around the league respected his game, and that's what Fred Warner is. Just became the modern era linebacker that can cover so well rather than just be a run stuffer. Back in the days of a Mike Singletary or something. This guy he has great range. He is their leader. Very heady, even keel. Will lead them at practice. Everything you want, and the Niners know it. They love it. Everybody around the league. I mean, you saw this year. Tony Romo and Aaron Rodgers were openly saying how he's the best linebacker in the league. So
Yep.
he's going to need to get paid. And this is a team that has a lot of money issues right now. They're right up against the cap, and they're going to have to pay Trent Williams a lot of money. And then I would say Fred Warner's the next guy that needs a big chunk of change. So do they get it done? It's going to get done either this year or next year. I mean, they're not going to let him walk, obviously. So you would think, although, hey, if you want to keep going back to quarterback trades and somebody's saying, give us your best linebacker and we'll give you this elite quarterback, then maybe you have to consider it. But I think they are so enraptured with Fred Warner. And remember, his linebacker coach is now your defensive coordinator, who's not going to want to let Fred Warner go. You need that for continuity's sake too. So I think they'll pay Fred and keep him happy.
Okay. And by the way, you mentioned Trent Williams. So
Yeah.
You get a pretty good feeling that because he's going to be the priority, that's a guy that they're going to be able to bring back?
Well, there's a couple things here. Trent he really enjoyed his time. I believe he felt at home again in Kyle Shanahan's offense, getting out of Washington. He was at a stage in his career where he didn't know if he was going to have to retire or not. He had the health scare, and he was great all season in terms of, well, especially with the media. He won our Media Good Guy Award, which is hard to do on Zoom, and you've never met any of the reporters before. But he just kind of kept it real and was very helpful. And then on the field, he was still a top level tackle, like big time top level. So he's going to get paid as one. It's how much is he seeking? Because this is probably the last contract of his career. Although, unless maybe he kind of can read the business aspect of it, and he's very savvy at that, knowing that the cap could be going back up next year. So maybe you take a cheaper deal and go for the big whopper following year. But I think he's a guy that knows. He put it this way. He said, "When's the last time you saw a franchise left tackle hit free agency? It just doesn't happen."
Sure.
The Raiders grossly overpaid for Trent Brown.
Yep.
When they chased after him just because he had a decent season in New England when Tom Brady makes everybody else look good. But the Niners had Trent, and his work ethic and his reliability and durability were always in question. And the Raiders found that out hard this past year, although he did have COVID issues, which is obviously a concern for anybody. So I think with Trent Williams, if he can get some decent money from the Niners, he's going to be stoked and stick around and play under an offensive line coach he absolutely loves, and Chris Forster.
All right. Well, because I look at the cap space, they're middle of the road in the NFL right now. I think they're about 14th. And I didn't notice. I was looking over the contracts, and I didn't really notice a lot of players that the Niners could. All right, well, maybe we'll cut this guy and save a boatload of money. The only player that you see that is Garoppolo, and I think that's probably why the rumors are so rampant with Jimmy G, is because that's the first thing that they're going to look at is the contract, and they go, "Oh, wait a second, Jimmy G's contract says that there's only $4.2 million in dead money over his last 2 years. The team can save $49 million. Well, why wouldn't they let that contract go?" But that's, again, there's more to the game than just that.
Well, and Kyle Shanahan explained it pretty well too, where he defended that, saying that's the going rate, that's the market rate for a good quarterback, right? You're not paying $45 million for the best quarterback. You're paying $24 million a year. I don't think that's a financial issue. They can move money around, as we just saw with the Rams taking on that boatload of hit with Jared Goff's money.
Yeah.
The Niners can part ways with Dee Ford and save some money. They can part ways with Weston Richburg, another injury-plagued free agent acquisition that they had. They can part ways with a couple other guys. Not a lot, but enough where they can make some cap money move. It's an organization that's been it's notorious for how they craft these cap deals to get out of it, keep some money. These team-friendly deals, right?
Yeah.
They did pay Jimmy Garoppolo a lot of money, but they can, like you said, they can get out of it. I believe only take like a $2.8 million dead cap hit if they let him go. But that is not, to me, that's not a driving factor whatsoever in this. It's the matter of, is there a better guy that they can bring in place of Garoppolo, and a guy that wants to come to San Francisco, a guy that works in Kyle Shanahan's scheme and can pick it up quickly.
Yeah, and I was having a conversation with Ryan Dunleavy from the New York Post earlier today, and that's one of the topics. We were looking over the teams that need quarterbacks, and there's just who. If you looked at it, we were going, where are these teams going to find quarterbacks? And if you look at San Francisco's situation, well, why would you compare it to, like you mentioned, Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins? Why? I don't see, there's not a major difference in my mind, especially like you mentioned, it's a system. And even though some of those guys that I mentioned, especially Cousins, knows the system and he's a little younger than Ryan, but why? It just seems like a lateral move. And it just doesn't make any sense unless you're going at a younger quarterback with tremendous upside, and then you're not getting that guy anyway.
I am actually more fascinated to find out where we are in a year, because think about the veteran names that have come up with Cousins, Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, the San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California native,
Aaron
right?
Rodgers.
He's going to be 1 year closer to getting out of Green Bay than he is right now. Tom Brady's contract will be up with Tampa Bay, and he wanted to come to this last year to the 49ers. There's a lot more intrigue to me in 2022 than now. So why don't you just roll the dice with Garoppolo another year? There's a dozen more teams in the NFL that are more desperate for their quarterback position and will have more equity to cough up than the 49ers are. So to me, and every day there's a new rumor about the 49ers, and it is beyond ludicrous right now. And a lot of these are uncredible sources, uncredible reports. And I just try to just like, look, it's the NFL, anything can happen. But I don't get the sense that they want to move off it and to go chase somebody.
All right, last couple of minutes. Let's just quickly the offensive line. Tomlinson seemed to have a really good season,
He
but
did okay. Yeah.
there were injuries though, and that
Yeah.
was so. How did that really? And how will that affect the center
Yeah.
right guard position moving forward?
Yeah. Okay. So the Niners essentially were on their six-string center towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
It was not a good situation, right? That really casts things us through. Right guard is one that they're trying to nail down. Daniel Brunskill's a guy that they bounced from right guard to center. He could have a spot in the organization going forward. Mike McGlinchey, their former first-round pick, he really struggled in pass protection and became a lightning rod for criticism throughout the year. But he was also one of the best run blockers in the league, and the Niners constantly defended him. So. And Tomlinson, like you said, he did okay. He wasn't as great as I thought he would be next to Trent Williams, and he actually allowed the sack in that Week 2 game that got Garoppolo hurt. So they need help on the interior, but it's kind of like it's the same old story. I would love to see them get sturdier and overpay somebody that's a quality center or right guard, which there's maybe one or two out there before they get franchise tagged. And maybe if they use a first round pick on an offensive line, it wouldn't stun me either.
Okay.
But the biggest offensive line question coming into the year was, how do you replace Joe Staley at left tackle? Yeah, you bring in Trent Williams.
Yes.
And Trent Williams was still a force there. So if Trent Williams gets away, this is where you're going to really scratch your head and go, they might want to have a more mobile quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo, because you don't know who's going to be able to protect that blind side.
And what about Richburg? Because obviously that was a big blow.
So Richburg, they paid a lot of money for him in free agency, and he played well. He had a knee injury at New Orleans in that game in 2019. Was out all of last season. He also had he had a bicep surgery or something else that like really scaled him back. So we don't know anything about him. He didn't talk to the media all year, and it was a bleak situation. So, but that's a guy that carries a high salary cap figure. That's why I'm saying, hey, you're not going to pay for that where he hasn't been able to be on the field. And so looking for a new center is a possibility too. And I think, Alex Mack's a guy, I believe that's a free agent from Atlanta that was in Shanahan's system. So you connect those kind of dots, and I think he's a Cal guy also. That's a good name I'd try to keep an eye on.
Okay. And running back situation was also banged up. It was incredible how banged up the running back unit was. McKinnon's a free agent. Coleman's a free agent. You mentioned Juszczyk's a free agent, the fullback. And then Mostert's a free agent next year. So, but they did just resign Jeff Wilson, correct?
Right. So this is what I'll try to make this quick, because this is very important for fantasy people too, because this always gets our questions, right?
Okay.
So Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. are your great 1-2 tandem going forward. Durability could be an issue with both those guys. They had high ankle sprains last year and stuff along the way. But that's a really good 1-2 tandem. Jermichael Hasty was an undrafted rookie who showed some signs this year before he broke his collarbone in November. So he kind of be a third back. They bring in another rookie or undrafted free agent. They plug and play in the Shanahan running back system. It's awesome. If these guys it works wonders. So that's your key guys at running back. I don't see Tevin Coleman coming back. Jerick McKinnon's not coming back. But retaining Kyle Juszczyk and overpaying for him and keeping him reunited with, Mike McDaniel, their run game coordinator. He's Kyle Shanahan's right-hand man. Very smart guy. He's now their offensive coordinator since Mike LaFleur went to be the Jets OC. And Juszczyk loves Mike McDaniel, so that could help keep him aboard too.
Okay, tight end. You have Dwelley and Reed. Well, Dwelley's a restricted free agent, so they'll probably bring him back, and they're pretty much set there. Of course, they have Kittle. He's like one of the best.
Yeah, Kittle, he had injuries last year, missed half the year with injuries, but he's the best when he plays. Everybody loves him. Dwelley's a guy that's kind of been here and there. I'm not so sure that he will come back, I would think, as a restricted free agent. Jordan Reed's a guy that did not live up to the expectations last year. He came in after not playing the year before with Washington. Just kind of, he had a couple, I think he had 4 or 5 touchdowns, but it was just kind of, it just wasn't there. There wasn't a lot of chemistry with the quarterback.
Yeah, he's overrated. He hasn't been good in years.
Well, it's just his health
Yeah.
issues, and they
Yeah.
really were. I don't want to. They were just very cautious with how they used him in practice and in games, and it just set them back. When Kittle's out half the year, and you have a guy that's Jordan Reed's name, should be able to fill that void,
Yes.
and never happened. So, hey, if you want to use that number 12 pick on that Florida tight end, Kyle Pitts, go for it, because you put two tight ends in this offense like that,
Wow.
it would be lights out.
Yes.
That could work really well for them, if they want to
That
go
could
that
be
route.
groundbreaking. That's the
Hmm.
type of idea I could see from Shanahan for sure. Wide
Yeah,
receiver, you got the injuries again. Debo dealing with the hamstring
Debo
injuries,
Samuel. Yeah,
and
yeah. So you
I
go
was going to
ahead.
say, and then Bourne's a free agent. Hurd tore his
Hmm.
ACL. But hey, you found one, or the team found one, I should say, in Ayuk. He had a great rookie season.
Yeah, they are set as long as Brandon Ayuk and Debo Samuel can stay
Yeah,
healthy. They are a dynamic duo of wide receiver. Kendrick Bourne was their number two receiver. He's been in the system for 4 years. I actually interviewed him today, and we talked about free agency. He says the Niners are talking to him. He'd like to stay, but he also is going to have options. And one thing working in Bourne's favor is there's a lot of offenses now that run the Shanahan
yeah.
offense. You got the Rams, you got the
Jets could
Jets.
use him. I'll tell you
Uh,
that.
the Jets, there's many teams around. I think the Falcons and Browns do something similar. So he wouldn't have to relearn on offense. But I don't know if you want to They're not going to overpay for him. Let's
Hmm.
be honest. They got to overpay for other guys. So Jalen Hurd is a guy whose name everybody every year. Oh, he's going to be fantastic, and he's yet to play a meaningful snap. He hasn't played in a game yet.
No.
He tore his ACL on the second practice of training camp this past year. And so you just can't rely
Hmm.
on it. I mean, if you get him, great. Otherwise, you need to find they need to find some better options in the slot. Some guys like when Trent Taylor was in the slot in 2017, he showed some signs, but he really tailed off this past year. So and Richie James is a guy who went nuts for I think 180 yards one game this past year when they had no receivers because of COVID. And so he's probably coming back, but they're going to need to bring in some more competition there. And they had so many injuries throughout training camp at wide receiver, and that set this offense back as well. So they need to stockpile some more guys
Do
there.
you remember a season with so many injuries?
Oh, absolutely not. This was the 49ers used, I believe, 84 players, which
That's incredible.
tied the Miami Dolphins. Well, but part of that is you can the way the IR rules were jiggled this year because of
Yeah.
COVID, and then because they had COVID. But there were so many injuries, so many guys going on injured reserve for season-ending injuries. It was they were just. It wasn't fair. It
And
was. Hey, I got COVID too during the season, so I wasn't exempt. We all suffered through this season.
all right. Lastly, and I don't usually bring up special teams unless there's a reason for it, but the team did not do well in special teams.
No,
So,
no, that was terrible.
could you point to any specific reason why?
Um, well, not
Could it just be the
necessarily. I mean,
trickle
we can
down
pick
of the
apart.
injuries and not having?
No, because I don't think that was it. I mean, almost every aspect of their special teams that they struggled in certain parts, right? I mean, Robbie Gould played okay, and they picked up his option, so he's coming back, and that's good because you want the veteran kicker if you're making one or two last runs of the
Sure.
playoff. Um, they had to change long snappers after a few games because their long snapper Kyle Nelson got too erratic. But then there were problems in their coverage units. Their return game lacked any flair. There was no spice to it. And they made like at least 4 or 5 major mistakes, including a blocked punt in the season opener that cost their loss to Arizona right off the bat. So you knew it was not going to be a great year for special teams. But like you said, in this year's NFL, when you're turning through so many players, 84 players, and putting different people in different spots, you're bound to have issues.
Cam, what are you working on right now? Anything in particular? Free agency, is that the big story?
No, here in San Francisco, it's always about the quarterbacks. And as long as Jimmy Garoppolo's
uh,
situation, it's constant monitoring the Jimmy Garoppolo, the 49ers quarterback issues. I did a piece today on Kendrick Bourne's free agency, and we got a couple other things in the works here. But
is that like your
it's
friends and
it's
your
all quarterback.
family? And is that all you get? Like anybody that you're
What,
just
like,
even in any sort of
you want?
contact with you, that's the first thing they're going to ask you, right?
I hadn't like my mailman the other day, like we had a guy that was on our route for many years and he got rerouted for the last like 6 months. We hadn't seen me. Anyway, I saw him like yesterday. And I'm like, hey, how you been? Where's your route? He's like, oh, a couple blocks away. He's like, hey, what's going on with Garoppolo? Is he moving along? And I'm just here. It just never ends. It's just, that's how it is. And I think fortunately, I think Jimmy's somewhat of a good sport about it because he understands how much scrutiny comes with that position here, thanks to Joe Montana and Steve Young, and obviously how important of a position it is in the NFL and on the 49ers. And that's why you make a lot of money
Yep.
at it. And he's not complaining about
That's
that.
it. Comes with the baggage.
Yeah.
It comes with all that money he's making. And that's why you also have to make sure before you sign guys to those kind of contracts that you feel like the guy can handle it. And apparently Jimmy's been able to handle it. Unfortunately, the injuries have set him back, and that's a disappointment. Nobody wants to see that.
Yep.
Cam, I appreciate it, and I
not.
look forward to, unless there's a huge Jimmy G story between now and the draft, I look forward to getting the opportunity to talk to you sometime right around draft time or right after so we can recap the offseason for the 49ers.
My pleasure, and I'm sure there'll be at least 4 or 5 huge Jimmy G stories by then.
We'll check them out. Thanks, Cam.
Okay.